What if I told you that a penny you might have tossed aside without a second thought could quietly be worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars today? Not because it's gold or silver, but because of a tiny detail almost nobody notices. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1951 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary, yet holds surprising history, hidden value, and serious collector demand. The 1951 Lincoln penny is part of one of the most famous coin series in American history. It features Abraham Lincoln on the front and two wheat stalks on the back, which is why collectors call it a wheat penny. These coins were minted from 1909 to 1958, and they remain some of the most widely collected U.S. coins today. But the 1951 no-mint mark version stands out because it was struck in Philadelphia, the main mint of the United States, and carries no mint mark beneath the date. To the untrained eye, it looks like just another old penny. But behind that simple copper surface is a story of post-war America, booming industry, and a mint working at full speed to keep up with a rapidly growing economy. Let's rewind to 1951. America was just a few years removed from World War II. Soldiers had returned home, families were growing, suburbs were expanding, and consumer spending was rising fast. The economy was shifting into high gear. With more people buying goods, more coins were needed to support everyday transactions. Pennies especially were essential for everything from newspapers to groceries. The U.S. Mint in Philadelphia produced massive numbers of cents that year. In fact, more than 1.3 billion Lincoln pennies were struck in 1951 without a mint mark. That's over a billion coins, which might sound like it would make them common and worthless. But coin collecting isn't just about how many were made. It's about how many survived, what condition they're in, and whether something unusual happened during the minting process. And in 1951, something very interesting did happen. Before we get to that, let's talk about what this coin is made of and what it looks like. The 1951 penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. That high copper content gives it a rich reddish color when new, and over time, it tones into brown shades or sometimes develops beautiful natural patina. Each coin weighs about 3.11 grams and measures just over 19 millimeters in diameter. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and first appeared in 1909 to mark the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. His initials, VDB, can be found subtly at the bottom of the shoulder on most coins, though they're tiny and easy to miss. On the back, instead of the Lincoln Memorial we see today, there are two wheat ears framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. Above that is the Latin phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of many one. This classic design gives the coin a distinctly vintage look that collectors love. Now here's where things get interesting. Even though over a billion 1951 no-mint mark pennies were produced, most of them entered circulation and stayed there for decades. They were spent, scratched, worn down, and eventually lost or melted. High-quality examples in pristine condition are surprisingly hard to find today. But beyond condition, certain minting errors and varieties from 1951 have made specific coins extremely valuable. One of the most famous and valuable is the 1951 doubled die obverse penny. A doubled die happens when the die used to strike the coin receives a doubled impression during its creation. This causes parts of the design, especially the date or lettering, to appear doubled to the naked eye or under magnification. On the 1951 doubled die penny, the doubling is often visible in the words Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date itself. These errors were never intentional. They slipped through quality control and entered circulation, where collectors later discovered them. Today, verified examples of the 1951 doubled die penny can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on condition. Another valuable variety involves repunched mint details, off-center strikes, die cracks, and clipped planchets. While these are less dramatic than doubled dies, they still attract serious collector attention and can significantly raise a coin's value. But even regular, non-era 1951 no-mint mark pennies can be worth far more than 1 cent. In average circulated condition, a typical 1951 penny might be worth 2 to 5 cents, mainly because of its copper content. But in uncirculated condition, where the coin still has its original mint luster and sharp details, values rise fast. A well-preserved, uncirculated 1951 penny can sell for $10 to $30 or more. And in top-tier certified condition, prices climb dramatically. For example, professional grading services like PCGS and NGC evaluate coins on a scale from 1 to 70. Coins graded MS67 or higher are considered extremely rare in any wheat penny date. A 1951 no-mint mark penny graded MS67 red has sold at auction for several $1,000s. In one major auction, a pristine example brought over $5,000 simply because so few survive in that condition. That's the fascinating part about this coin. Even though millions were made, only a tiny fraction remain in top-grade condition. Most people never saved pennies carefully, especially in the early 1950s when they were worth so little. That makes high-quality survivors incredibly desirable today. Now let's talk about how to tell if you have a real 1951 no-mint mark penny and whether it might be valuable. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1951. Then look just below the date. If there is no letter, meaning no D and no S, then it was minted in Philadelphia. That's what no mint mark means. Next, look at the color. Genuine 1951 pennies are copper-based and should not stick to a magnet. If your penny sticks to a magnet, that's a red flag, because steel cents were only made in 1943, not 1951. Then examine the details. On a real coin, Lincoln's portrait should be well defined, with visible hair detail, strong facial features, and clear lettering. Counterfeit coins often look soft or blurry, especially around the date and motto. If you suspect an error, such as doubled letters or numbers, use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom. True doubled dies show strong, rounded doubling, not flat shadows or machine doubling, which is far less valuable. And if you think your coin might be special, the best step is to have it professionally graded and authenticated. This not only confirms its legitimacy, but also maximizes its resale value. Now here's a fun and surprising fact. Even though the United States stopped making wheat pennies in 1958, they're still found in circulation today. Every year, collectors and casual coin hunters report finding 1950s wheat cents in pocket change, coin rolls, and old jars. The 1951 penny is one of the most common wheat cents still discovered in everyday circulation, which keeps excitement alive for people searching through their coins. Another interesting detail is that 1951 pennies were among the last to be produced before major design and production changes in the following decade. By 1959, the reverse design would switch from wheat stalks to the Lincoln Memorial, ending one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. That means the 1951 penny belongs to the final chapter of the wheat cent era, making it especially appealing to collectors completing date sets or building historical collections. Collectors love the 1951 no-mint mark penny for several reasons. First, it represents a strong moment in American history when the country was rebuilding, growing, and reshaping its future. Holding one feels like holding a piece of that post-war optimism. Second, it's affordable for beginners while still offering high-end potential for advanced collectors. You can buy a circulated example for a few cents, or chase rare error varieties and top-grade specimens worth thousands. That wide range makes the coin accessible, exciting, and rewarding at every level. Third, it's a perfect example of how everyday money can become a historical artifact. This penny once passed through grocery stores, gas stations, movie theaters, and lunch counters. It bought candy, newspapers, and coffee. Today, it sits behind glass cases, in collections, and in auction catalogs, admired not for what it buys, but for what it represents. Now let's talk about real-world values. A circulated 1951 no-mint mark penny typically sells for about 2 to 5 cents. An uncirculated one may range from $10 to $30. High-grade examples certified MS66 or MS67 can reach hundreds or thousands of dollars. And rare double-die varieties or major mint errors can push values even higher, sometimes into the five-figure range for exceptional specimens. That's an incredible journey for a coin that once held the lowest denomination in American currency. And here's something many people don't realize. Because these pennies are made mostly of copper, their melt value alone often exceeds their face value. While melting U.S. coins is illegal, this fact highlights how the materials inside these old cents have become more valuable than the money itself, adding another layer of intrigue. But the true value of the 1951 penny isn't just in dollars. It's in the stories it carries. It's in the idea that something small and ordinary can quietly become meaningful and valuable over time. It's proof that history doesn't always sit in museums. Sometimes it hides in drawers, jars, and forgotten boxes in your home. So what should you do if you find one? First, don't clean it. Cleaning coins, especially old copper ones, can dramatically reduce their value. Collectors want natural surfaces, even if they're dark or worn. Cleaning scratches the surface and removes original patina, making the coin far less desirable. Second, store it safely. Use a coin holder, envelope, or small plastic sleeve to protect it from moisture and handling. Third, examine it carefully for errors or unusual features. And if you believe it might be valuable, consider professional authentication. You never know what you might be holding. The 1951 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is more than just a coin. It's a reminder that history often hides in plain sight. That value isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, humble, and waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer. So the next time you hear change clink in your pocket, take a moment. Look at the dates. Look at the details. Because one of those coins might carry a story far bigger than its size. And who knows, that small copper penny might just be your connection to the past, or even your unexpected treasure. Thanks for watching, and keep checking your change. The next great discovery could already be in your hands. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet could be worth more than a full tank of gas, a new phone, or even a used car. It sounds impossible, but one small coin from the late 1950s has surprised collectors for decades: the 1958 D. Lincoln penny. Most people see a penny and think 1 cent. But collectors see history, hidden details, and sometimes unexpected value. And today, we're diving into one of the last classic wheat pennies ever made, a coin that quietly closed a chapter in American coinage, while becoming a favorite among collectors. The 1958 D. Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint and features the famous wheat ears on the back, a design that had been used since 1909. Just 1 year later, in 1959, the Lincoln Memorial would replace the wheat design forever. That makes 1958 the final year of the wheat cent series, and the Denver Mint version is one of the most widely collected of them all. At first glance, this penny looks simple. On the front, you see President Abraham Lincoln's profile facing right. Above his head is the word Liberty, and to the right is the date, 1958, with a small D mint mark just below it. That tiny letter tells us it was struck in Denver, Colorado. On the reverse, you see 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, with E pluribus unum across the top. This design may feel familiar, but it carries deep history. Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth, making it the first U.S. circulating coin to feature a real person. Before that, American coins usually showed symbolic figures like liberty instead of real presidents. That change made the Lincoln cent one of the most important coins in U.S. history. By 1958, the country was in a time of growth and confidence. World War II was long over, the economy was booming, and everyday Americans were spending coins like these on candy bars, newspapers, and gas station snacks. No one imagined that some of these pennies would one day become collectibles, or even valuable investments. The Denver Mint struck over 800 million Lincoln pennies in 1958. That sounds like a huge number, and it is. But survival in perfect condition is a different story. Most of these coins were heavily used in circulation. They were dropped, scratched, bent, and worn down over decades. As a result, finding one today in top condition is much harder than it seems. Let's talk about what this coin is made of. The 1958 D penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a diameter of 19 millimeters. That solid copper content gives these coins a warm reddish tone when new, which gradually darkens into brown over time. Collectors classify these coins as red, red-brown, or brown based on how much original copper color remains. Design-wise, this penny features the classic Lincoln portrait created by Victor David Brenner. His initials, VDB, can be found subtly on the shoulder of Lincoln's coat on the front of the coin. On the reverse, the wheat ears symbolize prosperity and abundance, reflecting early 20th century optimism about America's agricultural strength. Now, here's where things get interesting. Even though millions of 1958 D pennies were made, some examples are surprisingly valuable, especially those in pristine condition or with rare errors. Most circulated 1958 D pennies are worth only a few cents above face value, usually between 2 and 10 cents depending on condition. But uncirculated examples can be worth much more. A 1958 D penny graded in mint condition, especially with full red color, can sell for anywhere from $5 to $50, and in top grades, sometimes much more. Some of the finest known examples, graded MS67 or higher by professional grading services, have sold for several $100s at auction. But condition isn't the only factor. Errors and varieties can dramatically increase a coin's value. One of the most exciting things collectors search for is a double die, where parts of the design appear doubled due to a mistake during the minting process. While the famous double die of this era is the 1958 Philadelphia version, minor doubling and other striking errors can still be found on Denver coins. Another error collectors look for is off-center strikes, where the design is not centered on the coin blank. Some off-center 1958 D pennies have sold for $50 to $200, depending on how dramatic the misalignment is and whether the date and mint mark are visible. Clipped planchets are another possibility. This happens when the metal sheet is improperly cut before striking, resulting in a coin with a curved missing section. A genuine clipped 1958 D penny can sell for anywhere from $30 to over $100 depending on condition. Then there are repunched mint marks. In earlier decades, mint marks were punched into coin dies by hand, and sometimes the mark was stamped more than once in slightly different positions. On some 1958 D pennies, collectors have found repunched D mint marks, which can add modest premiums for specialists who collect varieties. Now let's talk about real-world sales. A 1958 D Lincoln penny, graded MS67 red by PCGS, sold at auction for over $1,000 due to its exceptional condition and vibrant original color. That's for a coin that originally cost just 1 cent. Other high-grade examples have sold for several $100s, especially when demand from registry set collectors is strong. Even coins in more modest uncirculated grades, like MS64 or MS65, often sell for $10 to $40 depending on eye appeal. That means a penny you might find in an old coin jar could potentially be worth dozens or even hundreds of times its face value. So how do you tell if you have a real 1958 D penny and whether it might be valuable? First, check the date. It should clearly read 1958 on the front. Then look just below the date for a small D mint mark. No mint mark means it was struck in Philadelphia, not Denver. Next, examine the color. If the coin still has bright reddish tones instead of dark brown, it may be closer to uncirculated condition. Then look at the details. Check Lincoln's hair, cheekbone, and jawline. On the reverse, examine the wheat stalks and lettering. If these areas are sharp and well-defined, the coin has likely seen little wear. Also, look for anything unusual, doubling in the letters, an off-center strike, or strange shapes along the edges. These could indicate mint errors, which often increase value. As for fakes, most counterfeit pennies are not made to fool collectors but to alter rare dates. The 1958 D penny is not commonly faked, but altered mint marks do exist. Some people add a fake D to a Philadelphia coin. Under magnification, fake mint marks often look too thick, uneven, or incorrectly placed. A genuine mint mark should look clean, natural, and properly aligned. If you think you've found a high-quality or unusual example, professional grading services like PCGS or NGC can authenticate and grade your coin, giving you an official assessment of its condition and market value. Here's a fun fact. The 1958 wheat penny represents the end of an era. In 1959, the Lincoln Memorial design replaced the wheat ears, making the wheat reverse instantly nostalgic. That's one reason collectors love 1958 pennies. They're the final chapter of a design that had lasted nearly 50 years. Another interesting detail is that copper prices have risen significantly since the 1950s. While it's illegal to melt U.S. coins for their metal value, the copper content of these pennies is worth more than 1 cent at market rates, adding to their appeal as tangible assets. Collectors also enjoy building full sets of Lincoln wheat pennies by year and mint mark. The 1958 D is one of the key end-of-series coins needed to complete a Denver mint wheat cent collection, which keeps demand steady year after year. And here's something surprising. Many high-grade 1958 D pennies came from original mint rolls that were saved by collectors or investors who believed copper coins would someday become valuable. When those rolls were opened decades later, some coins were found in stunning condition, leading to record-setting auction prices. Despite being common in circulated condition, truly perfect examples are rare. That combination, common but condition-sensitive, makes the 1958 D penny exciting for collectors at every level. Beginners can afford circulated examples for a few cents, while advanced collectors chase top-graded specimens worth hundreds or even thousands. Another fun detail is that because 1958 was the final wheat penny year, some people intentionally saved them as souvenirs, even if they didn't consider themselves collectors. That means these coins often appear in old jars, drawers, and family collections, waiting to be rediscovered. So why does this penny still matter today? It tells a story of transition, from classic wheat design to modern memorial design, from early 20th century craftsmanship to mid-century mass production. It connects everyday Americans of the 1950s to collectors of today. And most importantly, it proves that even the smallest coins can carry unexpected value. The 1958 D Lincoln penny reminds us that rarity isn't always about low mintage. Sometimes, it's about condition, survival, timing, and demand. A coin that once bought a piece of candy could now be worth hundreds of dollars, simply because it survived in exceptional shape. Collectors love this coin because it's approachable, historical, and full of potential. You don't need to be wealthy or experienced to own one. You just need curiosity, a careful eye, and maybe an old jar of pennies sitting in your home. And that's what makes coin collecting so exciting. Every pocket, drawer, or inherited box of change could contain a small piece of American history, and sometimes a surprise. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1958, don't dismiss it. Flip it over. Look for that tiny D, check the color. Study the details. Because what looks like ordinary spare change could be one of the last wheat pennies ever made and possibly worth far more than you imagined. And who knows? The next time you reach into a jar of old coins, you might not just be holding copper, you might be holding history. Most people would never guess that a small brown penny from 1969 could be worth more than a brand new car. But one version of the 1969 Lincoln penny has shocked collectors by selling for tens of thousands of dollars. And even the common ones hiding in pocket change today still hold stories that few people know. So what makes the 1969 Lincoln penny special, and why are collectors still searching for it more than 50 years later? The 1969 Lincoln Memorial penny was struck at the Denver Mint and is one of the most widely circulated coins in American history. It features Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a design used from 1959 through 2008. At first glance, it looks like just another ordinary copper penny. But behind that simple design is a fascinating moment in U.S. history, a rare error that stunned the coin world, and a growing collector demand that continues today. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the late 1960s. The United States was in the middle of social change, economic pressure, and rising metal prices. Copper had become expensive, and the U.S. Mint was already looking for ways to reduce costs. At the same time, Americans were using more coins than ever for vending machines, parking meters, and everyday purchases. The mint needed to produce huge numbers of pennies quickly and efficiently. In 1969, over 4 billion Lincoln cents were struck across all mints. The Denver Mint alone produced more than 4 billion pennies that year, marked with a small D beneath the date. These coins were meant to circulate widely and last a long time. No one at the time expected that some of them would one day become collectible treasures. The design itself was already familiar. Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the front was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and had been used since 1909, marking the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial replaced the wheat ears design in 1959, showing a detailed view of the famous Washington, D.C. monument. If you look closely, you can even see Lincoln's seated statue inside the memorial, making this one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. The 1969 D penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, just like most pennies of the era. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a smooth edge. When new, it had a bright reddish color, but most examples today appear brown due to decades of circulation and exposure to air. On the surface, this coin seems ordinary, but what makes the 1969 penny famous among collectors isn't the Denver version itself. It's a rare error coin from the Philadelphia Mint, known as the 1969's double die obverse. That coin, without a mint mark and with dramatic doubling on the date and lettering, is one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever discovered. Some have sold for over $100,000. Because of that famous error, the entire 1969 penny series gained attention. Collectors began examining every 1969 cent they could find, including the Denver minted ones. While the 1969 D penny does not have the famous double die error, it still holds value depending on condition, color, and strike quality, and it represents a key year in U.S. coin history. One interesting detail about 1969 pennies is that counterfeiting became a serious issue. After the valuable double die coins were discovered, people tried to fake them by altering regular pennies. The U.S. Secret Service actually became involved in coin investigations during this period, which is extremely rare in numismatic history. That alone gives 1969 Lincoln cents a legendary status among collectors. Now let's talk about what makes the 1969 D penny special in its own way. First, it was produced during the final years of the traditional copper penny. Just 13 years later, in 1982, the mint switched to mostly zinc pennies with a thin copper coating. That makes all Pennies 1,982 pennies, including the 1969 D, more desirable to collectors who prefer the classic solid copper composition. Second, high-quality examples of this coin are harder to find than most people realize. While billions were minted, very few survived in pristine condition. Pennies were heavily used, dropped, scratched, and worn down in circulation. Finding a 1969 D penny today that still has full red color, sharp details, and no marks is surprisingly difficult. That scarcity in top condition drives collector interest and value. Third, Denver Mint coins from the late 1960s sometimes show weaker strikes compared to Philadelphia coins, especially in Lincoln's hair and the lettering. Strongly struck examples with full details stand out and command higher prices. So how valuable is a 1969 D Lincoln penny today? In circulated condition, most examples are worth between 1 and 5 cents. That's right, many are still face value coins. But in uncirculated condition, especially those with bright red color, prices increase quickly. A typical uncirculated 1969 D penny can sell for $5 to $15. High-grade certified examples can bring $50 or more. The real surprises come with top-tier coins graded by professional services. A 1969 D penny graded MS67 red, meaning nearly perfect condition with full original color, has sold at auction for several $100s. In rare cases, exceptionally sharp and flawless examples have reached over $1,000. For a coin that once bought a piece of candy, that's a remarkable return. Collectors also search for unusual errors on 1969 D pennies. These include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and rotated dies. While these errors are not common, they do exist, and some can sell for $20 to several $100s depending on severity and eye appeal. A dramatic off-center strike from 1969 D, where part of the design is missing but still visible, can be especially valuable. Another interesting variety involves repunched mint marks, where the D mint mark appears doubled or shifted slightly. These occurred when mint marks were manually punched into working dies, and sometimes the punch was misaligned. Some 1969 D repunched mint mark varieties are collected and can sell for small premiums, especially in high-grade condition. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1969 D penny and avoid confusion with other coins. First, look at the date. It should clearly read 1969. Beneath the date, you should see a small D, indicating it was struck in Denver. The D should look clean and well-shaped, not blurry or oddly thick. Next, check the overall weight and size. A genuine 1969 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams and be about 19 millimeters in diameter. If the coin feels unusually light or heavy, it may be damaged, altered, or not authentic. Examine the color. Original uncleaned coins will range from bright red to reddish brown to deep brown. Coins that look unnaturally shiny or have an odd surface texture may have been cleaned, which reduces collector value significantly. Also, beware of claims about doubled dies. The famous doubled die from 1969 is from San Francisco and has no mint mark. A 1969 D penny is not supposed to have strong doubling on the date or lettering. Minor machine doubling, which looks flat and shelf-like, is common and does not add value. True doubled dies show rounded, raised doubling that looks like a second image. If someone claims a 1969 D penny is worth tens of thousands of dollars because of doubling, that's almost always incorrect. Now let's look at some real-world examples of what these coins sell for. In one auction, a 1969 D Lincoln penny, graded MS67 red, sold for over $600 due to its exceptional color and strike. Another example with a dramatic off-center strike sold for more than $250. Even more modest uncirculated examples regularly sell for $10 to $30 online. These numbers may not seem shocking compared to six-figure coins, but remember, this is still a penny, and millions of people may already own one without realizing it. One fun fact about the 1969 penny series is that it became one of the most searched-for dates in American coin collecting history. When news spread about the rare double die era, collectors across the country began checking jars, piggy banks, cash registers, and bank rolls. It sparked one of the largest coin hunting waves in modern U.S. history. Another surprising detail is that some of the counterfeit double die coins were so convincing that even experienced collectors were fooled at first. This led to stricter authentication standards and increased reliance on professional grading services. In a way, the 1969 penny helped shape how coins are evaluated and certified today. The 1969 D penny also represents the end of an era in American coinage. It comes from the final decade before the penny's metal composition changed. It also comes from the final years before mint marks were standardized in appearance and placement. Coins from this period still carry the weight, feel, and sound of classic American copper coinage. Collectors love the 1969 D penny for several reasons. First, it's affordable. New collectors can start with just a few dollars and still own a piece of history. Second, it's easy to find, which makes searching fun and accessible. Third, high-grade examples offer real upside potential, especially as more coins are damaged or lost over time. Many collectors also enjoy building full daytime mint sets of Lincoln Memorial pennies, and the 1969 D is a key part of that journey. While not rare in general, finding a flawless example with full red color and sharp details is a true challenge, even today. Another reason collectors appreciate this coin is its connection to one of the most famous eras in U.S. numismatics. Even though the 1969 D penny is not the double die, it belongs to the same legendary year. That association gives it a special place in coin history and makes it more interesting to own and discuss. Now imagine this. Somewhere right now, a 1969 D penny is sitting in a drawer, cup holder, or coin jar. It may have been passed from hand to hand for decades, unnoticed. But if it happens to be in exceptional condition, it could be worth far more than its face value. And even if it's worn, it still carries a story from a time when America was changing, when copper still ruled the penny, and when one small mistake at the mint created a legend. So the next time you see a penny from 1969 with a small D under the date, don't ignore it. Take a closer look. Check its color. Study its details. You might not find a fortune, but you'll be holding a real piece of American history in your hand. And who knows? The coin that changes everything for you might already be in your pocket. Most people would walk right past this penny without giving it a second thought. But what if I told you that a small copper coin from 1970, one that might be sitting in a jar, drawer, or old wallet, could be worth far more than 1 cent, and in rare cases, thousands of dollars? Today, we're uncovering the hidden story behind the 1970 D Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary, but holds some surprising secrets. The coin we're talking about today is the 1970 D Mint Mark Lincoln cent. The D means it was struck at the Denver Mint, and like all Lincoln pennies since 1909, it features President Abraham Lincoln on the front. At first glance, it looks just like many other pennies from the late 1960s and early 1970s. But collectors know this year holds special meaning, especially when it comes to rare errors and unexpected value. To understand why this penny matters, we have to step back to the year 1970. America was going through a major cultural shift. The Vietnam War was ongoing, the space race was still fresh in people's minds, and inflation was starting to affect everyday life. At the same time, the U.S. Mint was dealing with a serious coin shortage that had plagued the country throughout the 1960s. People had been hoarding coins because of rising metal prices, and vending machines were becoming more common, increasing demand for small change. By 1970, the Mint was working hard to keep coins flowing into circulation. The Denver Mint produced over 2.5 billion Lincoln cents that year, making the 1970 D penny one of the most widely struck coins of its time. With numbers like that, you might assume every example is common and worth only face value. But history has shown that even mass-produced coins can hide rare treasures, and this penny is proof of that. The design of the 1970 D Lincoln cent follows the familiar style Americans had seen for decades. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln's right-facing profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, and behind him appears the motto "In God We Trust." The date, 1970, sits in front of his portrait with the small D mint mark just below it. On the reverse side, the coin features the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the center of the memorial, you can even see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside, one of the most detailed designs ever used on a U.S. circulating coin. The metal composition is another important detail. Unlike modern pennies made mostly of zinc, the 1970 D cent is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. That gives it a richer reddish-brown color and a slightly heavier feel than today's pennies. Many collectors prefer these older copper cents because of their durability, appearance, and historical value. So if billions were made, what makes the 1970 D penny special? The answer lies in condition and errors, and one particular variety that collectors hunt aggressively. Most 1970 D pennies in worn condition are worth just 1 or 2 cents. Even uncirculated examples typically sell for a few dollars, but certain high-quality coins and rare varieties can be worth hundreds or even thousands. One of the most sought-after versions of the 1970 penny is actually not from Denver, but the famous 1970s small date variety from San Francisco. However, the Denver Mint also produced coins with valuable errors that collectors actively search for, and some of them are extremely rare. One important category is double die errors. These happen when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during manufacturing, causing parts of the design, especially letters or numbers, to appear doubled. On certain 1970 D pennies, collectors have found doubling in the date or lettering, which can dramatically increase value. Another valuable error is the off-center strike. These coins were not properly aligned when struck, causing part of the design to be missing and blank metal to appear on one side. If the date and mint mark are still visible, these off-center 1970 D pennies can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s, depending on how dramatic the error is. Then there are clipped planchet errors, where a piece of the metal blank was missing before the coin was struck, creating a curved or straight missing section on the edge. These unusual shapes are highly collectible, and 1970 D examples can sell for strong premiums. But the real money comes from condition. A perfectly preserved 1970 D penny with full mint luster and no signs of wear can be surprisingly valuable. In professional grading terms, coins are rated on a scale from 1 to 70. Coins graded M-67 or higher are extremely rare for this issue. At that level, even a common date penny becomes a collector prize. In recent years, high-grade 1970 D Lincoln cents have sold at auction for impressive amounts. One example, graded M-67 red, sold for over $1,000. Another exceptionally sharp coin reached nearly $2,000, simply because it survived decades of circulation without losing its original shine. That's the fascinating part about coins like this. Two pennies from the same year can look almost identical to the untrained eye, yet one might be worth 1 cent, while the other could be worth more than a month's rent, all because of tiny differences in condition or striking quality. Now let's talk about how to tell if you have a real 1970 penny and not something altered or fake. First, check the date and mint mark. The 1970 should appear clean and evenly spaced, with a small D beneath it. The mint mark should look natural, not scratched in, glued on, or oddly shaped. Some counterfeiters try to add mint marks to coins to create fake rarities, but these usually look rough under magnification. Next, look at the weight. A genuine 1970 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams because it's made of mostly copper. If it feels unusually light, it could be damaged, plated, or not genuine. Then examine the color and surface. Original copper cents from this era should have a warm reddish tone if uncirculated, or brown tones if circulated. If the coin looks overly shiny or coated, it may have been cleaned or altered, which lowers its value significantly. If you suspect you have a valuable error or high-grade coin, the best step is to have it examined by a professional grading service. They can authenticate it, assign a grade, and seal it in a protective holder, making it easier to sell or insure. Now here's something many people don't realize. Even though the 1970 penny isn't rare by mintage numbers, it represents the final years of traditional copper cents before major changes came to U.S. coinage. Just over a decade later, in 1982, the mint switched to copper-plated zinc pennies to reduce costs. That makes coins like the 1970 part of the last generation of solid copper Lincoln cents, and that alone adds historical appeal. Another fun fact is that many people alive today grew up using these exact pennies. They bought candy, paid phone booths, and filled piggy banks with them. Yet almost no one thought to save them in pristine condition. That's why high-grade examples are now so difficult to find. There's also something fascinating about error coins from this period. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, the mint was producing coins at extremely high speeds to meet demand. That increased the chances of mistakes slipping through, and those mistakes are now prized by collectors. Each error coin tells a story of a brief mechanical failure that escaped inspection and entered circulation, becoming a one-of-a-kind survivor. Collectors love the 1970 Lincoln penny because it sits at the intersection of history, nostalgia, and possibility. It's old enough to feel meaningful, common enough to still be found, and mysterious enough to spark treasure-hunting excitement. You don't need a vault, a museum, or a fortune to start looking, just a handful of change and a curious eye. For many collectors, this coin represents the thrill of the hunt. It's not about buying something expensive. It's about discovering something valuable hiding in plain sight. It's about checking a jar of old pennies and wondering, what if one of these is special? And sometimes, that question leads to an answer worth far more than anyone expected. What makes this even more exciting is that people still find these coins today. Old collections get inherited. Coin jars get dumped into counting machines. Estate sales reveal boxes that haven't been opened in decades. And occasionally, tucked among ordinary cents, a high-grade 1970 penny or rare error example quietly waits to be discovered. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1970 with a small D beneath the year, don't ignore it. Turn it over. Check its shine. Look closely at the letters and numbers. Because while most are worth only 1 cent, a few are worth far more, and you'll never know unless you look. The 1970 Lincoln penny reminds us that history doesn't always sit in museums or vaults. Sometimes, it's hiding in a pocket, a drawer, or a forgotten jar of change. And sometimes, the smallest things carry the biggest surprises. So before you spend your next penny, take a second look. Because the next 1 cent coin you hold could be more than just money. It could be a piece of American history, or even a hidden treasure waiting to be found. Most people have held this coin without ever looking twice at it. But what if I told you that a simple 1979 penny with a tiny letter under Lincoln's date could quietly be worth far more than 1 cent, and in rare cases, hundreds or even thousands of dollars? Today, we're uncovering the hidden story of the 1979 D. Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary, but carries secrets most Americans don't know. The 1979 D. Lincoln penny is a 1 cent coin struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small D mint mark below the year. At first glance, it seems just like millions of other pennies: Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, and a familiar copper tone. But this coin comes from a fascinating moment in U.S. history, and certain examples have become surprisingly valuable to collectors. To understand why, we need to travel back to the late 1970s. America was dealing with inflation, rising metal prices, and growing concerns about the cost of producing everyday coins. Copper prices were climbing, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to find ways to reduce costs while still producing billions of coins for circulation. In 1979, pennies were still made mostly of copper, but change was already on the horizon. Just a few years later, in 1982, the mint would switch to copper-plated zinc coins, forever changing the feel and composition of the penny. The Lincoln cent itself had already been around for 70 years by 1979. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, making it the first U.S. circulating coin to feature a real historical person. By 1979, the Lincoln penny had become one of the most recognizable coins in the world, passed from hand to hand every day, often overlooked and rarely appreciated. The Denver Mint produced over 4.1 billion pennies in 1979 alone. That's billion with a B. With numbers like that, you might assume every 1979 D penny is worth exactly 1 cent, and most of them are. But collectors know that value isn't always about how many were made. It's about condition, errors, and rarity within the population. And that's where things get interesting. Let's start with the design. On the front of the coin, you'll see Abraham Lincoln's profile facing right. Above his head is the word Liberty, and in front of his face is the famous motto, "In God We Trust." Just below the date, you'll find the small D mint mark, showing it was struck in Denver. On the reverse side is the Lincoln Memorial, a design that was first introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely between the pillars of the memorial, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside, one of the smallest and most detailed elements ever placed on a U.S. coin. In 1979, pennies were made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving them a warm, reddish tone when new. They weighed about 3.11 grams and had a solid, sturdy feel compared to modern pennies, which are lighter and sound different when dropped. For many collectors, these Pennies 1982 copper pennies hold special appeal simply because they're no longer made that way. Now, let's talk about what makes certain 1979 D pennies valuable. The first factor is condition. Most pennies from this era were heavily circulated, used in vending machines, parking meters, cash registers, and everyday transactions. That means scratches, worn details, and faded surfaces are common. But when a coin survives in near-perfect condition, especially uncirculated condition, its value can jump dramatically. Collectors grade coins on a scale from poor condition all the way up to mint state, or MS, meaning the coin shows no signs of wear and looks just as it did when it left the mint. A typical circulated 1979 D penny might be worth 1 or 2 cents. But an uncirculated example in top condition, especially with strong original luster and clean surfaces, can sell for $10, $50, or even more, depending on the grade. But condition alone isn't the whole story. Some of the most valuable 1979 D pennies are error coins, coins that were accidentally struck with mistakes during the minting process. These errors make the coins rare, unusual, and highly desirable to collectors. One of the most popular errors is the off-center strike. This happens when the coin blank isn't properly centered in the press, causing part of the design to be missing, while another part stretches toward the edge. A dramatic off-center 1979 D penny that still shows the full date and mint mark can sell for $50 to $300 or more, depending on how extreme the error is and how well the coin is preserved. Another sought-after error is the double die. This occurs when the coin die itself is misaligned during the hubbing process, causing parts of the design, like the date, lettering, or Lincoln's profile, to appear doubled. A genuine double-die 1979 D penny can be worth hundreds of dollars, and in rare cases, more, especially if the doubling is bold and easy to see without magnification. There are also clipped planchet errors, where part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, resulting in a curved or straight bite taken out of the coin's edge. These errors can range in value from $20 to over $100, depending on size and appearance. Another category includes broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the retaining collar, causing it to spread out wider than normal with no raised rim. These too can fetch solid premiums. Then there are wrong planchet errors, which are among the most exciting. These occur when a penny is accidentally struck on a blank intended for a different coin. For example, a 1979 D penny struck on a dime or foreign coin planchet would be extremely rare and could sell for thousands of dollars at auction. Now let's look at some real-world examples. In recent years, high-grade 1979 D pennies, graded by major grading services like PCGS or NGC, have sold for impressive prices. A flawless example, graded MS67 red, meaning it retains full original copper color, has sold at auction for several $100s. Some top population coins, meaning the highest known grade for that issue, have crossed the $1,000 mark in competitive bidding. Error coins bring even more excitement. A dramatic off-center 1979 D penny sold for over $250. A well-known double die example has sold for over $500. And rare wrong planchet errors from the late 1970s have sold anywhere from $1,500 to over $5,000, depending on the details and authenticity. These prices may sound shocking for a coin that once bought a piece of candy, but to collectors, rarity and condition matter more than face value. So how do you know if you might have a valuable 1979 D penny? First, check the date and mint mark. Look just below the year 1979 on the front of the coin. If you see a small D, it was minted in Denver. No letter means Philadelphia, and an S would mean San Francisco. Next, examine the coin's condition. Is Lincoln's hair sharp and detailed or worn smooth? Are the words crisp and bold or faded? Is the surface shiny and clean or dull and scratched? The better the condition, the more potential value the coin may have. Then look for errors. Use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom. Check the date, the word Liberty, and In God We Trust for doubling. Look at the edges for missing metal, unusual shapes, or uneven borders. Check the coin's size and thickness compared to a normal penny. Anything that looks strange or different could be worth further investigation. If you think you've found something unusual, avoid cleaning the coin. Cleaning can damage the surface and dramatically reduce its value. Instead, store it in a soft holder and consider having it evaluated by a professional coin dealer or third-party grading service. It's also important to be cautious about fakes and altered coins. Some people try to create fake errors by filing edges, pressing designs, or altering mint marks. A genuine error coin will show natural metal flow and consistent wear patterns. If a coin looks suspiciously altered, uneven, or too perfect in the wrong ways, It's best to get expert verification before assuming it's valuable. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1979 penny. First, 1979 was one of the last full years before the major copper change in 1982. That means your 1979 D penny is part of the final generation of traditional copper cents, giving it historical importance beyond its face value. Second, if you weigh your 1979 D penny and it weighs about 3.11 grams, it confirms it's the older copper type. Modern pennies weigh about 2.5 grams and feel noticeably lighter. Third, billions of 1979 pennies are still sitting in jars, drawers, and old collections across the country. That means valuable examples are still being discovered today, sometimes by people sorting through inherited change, old piggy banks, or forgotten coin rolls. Fourth, collectors often search through rolls of pennies from banks, specifically looking for high-grade examples from the late 1970s. Finding a perfectly preserved 1979 D penny in circulation today is extremely rare, which makes the hunt exciting. Fifth, the Lincoln Memorial reverse design ended in 2008, meaning the 1979 D penny belongs to a classic era of American coinage that's already passed into history. So why do collectors love this coin today? Part of the appeal is nostalgia. Many collectors grew up handling pennies from the 1970s and 1980s, and finding a clean, untouched example feels like rediscovering a piece of childhood. Another reason is accessibility. Unlike rare gold coins or ancient currency, the 1979 D penny is something almost anyone might already own, making the hobby feel open and exciting. There's also the thrill of possibility. Even though most 1979 D pennies are worth only a cent, the chance of finding a rare error or top-grade example keeps collectors searching. It turns everyday pocket change into a treasure hunt, where a single overlooked coin could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Most importantly, the 1979 D penny represents a moment in American history when traditional copper coins were about to disappear. Inflation was reshaping everyday life, and the mint was preparing for major changes. Holding one is like holding a small piece of that era in your hand. So the next time you come across a 1979 penny, don't just toss it aside. Flip it over. Look for the tiny D, check the details. Examine the edges. Because while most of these coins are still just 1 cent, a small number of them are quietly worth far more, and one of them could be sitting in your pocket right now. And that's the magic of coin collecting. Ordinary objects become extraordinary when you understand their story. A simple penny turns into a time capsule, and sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest surprises. So keep your eyes open. Your next valuable discovery might not come from a vault or an auction house. It might come from your spare change jar, waiting to be noticed. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you that a single 1984 Lincoln cent, the kind sitting in jars and drawers across America, could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, if it's the right one? And the most surprising part is, the rarest versions don't look rare at all. Today, we're uncovering the real story behind the 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, where it came from, what makes certain examples special, and how an ordinary-looking cent could turn into something collectors actively search for. The coin we're talking about is the 1984 Lincoln Memorial Cent with no mint mark. That means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not place mint marks on most coins at the time. Millions upon millions of these pennies were produced, and for most people, they're just spare change. But buried among those ordinary cents are a few rare varieties that can turn pocket change into serious collector value. To understand why, we need to step back to the early 1980s. By 1984, the Lincoln cent had already been around for 75 years. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Over time, the design evolved, but the familiar portrait of Lincoln on the front remained unchanged. On the back since 1959, the Lincoln Memorial had replaced the original wheat stalks, symbolizing unity, democracy, and remembrance. The early 1980s were a turning point for U.S. coins, especially pennies. Copper prices had risen sharply, making it more expensive to produce cents than their face value. In response, the U.S. Mint changed the penny's composition in 1982 from solid copper to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That change saved money, but it also created a whole new world of minting challenges, including weak strikes, plating problems, and accidental design errors. By 1984, the mint was fully producing these zinc-based pennies, and production numbers were massive. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck more than 4 billion cents that year. With so many coins moving through high-speed presses, mistakes were bound to happen. Most were caught and destroyed. Some slipped through, and those are the coins collectors are hunting today. At first glance, a 1984 no-mint mark penny looks ordinary. On the front, you'll see Abraham Lincoln's profile facing right. The word liberty appears to his left. The year 1984 sits to his right, and above his head are the words "In God We Trust." On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial with United States of America across the top, 1 cent at the bottom, and EPLURIBUSUNUM above the building. The coin is about 19 millimeters wide and weighs roughly 2.5 grams. Because it's mostly zinc, it feels lighter than older copper pennies. The color is a bright reddish tone when new, but many examples today appear brown or darkened from circulation. So what makes some 1984 no-mint mark pennies special? The most famous and valuable variety is known as the 1984 double die obverse. This is not damage. It's not wear. It's a real mint error that happened during the die creation process. A double die occurs when the die that strikes the coin receives multiple impressions that are slightly misaligned. When that die strikes coins, certain details appear doubled, almost as if there's a shadow behind the letters or numbers. On the 1984 double die penny, the doubling is strongest on the date 1984 and the word liberty. Under magnification, you can clearly see separation between the numbers and letters, especially on the 9 and 8 in the date and the letters in Liberty. This is not a blurry or fuzzy look. It's crisp, mechanical doubling, and that's exactly what collectors want. Most people assume doubled coins must look dramatic, like two full images side by side. But real doubled die coins often show subtle separation that's easy to miss unless you know where to look. That's why so many valuable 1984 double die cents may still be hiding in circulation, unnoticed for decades. Another collectible variety from 1984 involves off-center strikes, broad strikes, and die cracks. These happen when the coin blank isn't properly positioned during striking, or when the die itself begins to fail. While most of these errors are minor and worth only a few dollars, dramatic examples with missing designs or unusual shapes can command strong premiums. There are also examples with weak strikes and missing details, especially on Lincoln's hair and beard. While these aren't usually as valuable as doubled dies, collectors who specialize in mint errors often pay more for visually interesting pieces. But the real star of the 1984 no-mint mark penny remains the double die obverse. So how valuable can it really be? In average circulated condition, a normal 1984 penny is worth exactly 1 cent. Even in uncirculated condition, most standard examples are worth only a few cents to maybe $1 or $2 if they're bright, clean, and untouched. But a confirmed 1984 double die penny is a different story. Lower grade examples that show clear doubling, but have wear from circulation often sell for $100 to $300. Mid-grade uncirculated pieces regularly sell for $500 to over $1,000. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services have sold at auction for several $1,000s, especially when the doubling is strong and the surfaces are clean. Some top-tier examples have crossed the $3,000 to $4,000 range, and prices can fluctuate depending on collector demand and overall market conditions. For a penny that originally cost 1 cent, that kind of return is almost unbelievable. And here's what makes it even more exciting. Unlike ultra-rare gold coins or ancient relics, these pennies were minted in modern times and circulated widely. That means there's still a chance, even today, that someone could find one in a coin jar, old roll, or inherited collection without realizing what they have. Now, let's talk about how to tell a real one from a fake or a damaged coin. First, you need a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, ideally 10x magnification. Look closely at the date 1984. On a true doubled die, you'll see distinct separation on the numbers, especially on the 9 and the 8. The doubling won't look mushy or smeared. It will look sharp, like two outlines slightly offset. Next, check the word Liberty. On genuine doubled die examples, you'll see clear doubling on the letters, especially the B and E again. This doubling should appear crisp and consistent across the word. Also examine In God We Trust. Some doubled die examples show slight doubling there as well, though the strongest area remains the date and Liberty. Be careful not to confuse this with machine doubling, which is much more common. Machine doubling happens during the striking process when the die bounces slightly, creating flat, shelf-like edges on letters and numbers. This kind of doubling does not add value and is considered damage or production instability. True doubled dies, on the other hand, show rounded, fully formed secondary images. Weight can also help. A genuine 1984 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it weighs significantly more or less, it could be damaged, altered, or from a different year. For high-value examples, professional authentication is essential. Coin grading services like PCGS or NGC can confirm whether the coin is a genuine doubled die and assign it a grade that helps determine market value. Let's look at some real-world examples. One circulated 1984 doubled die penny graded AU, meaning almost uncirculated, sold for over $600 at auction. Another in mint state condition, graded MS64, sold for around $1,800. A higher grade MS66 example crossed the $3,500 mark. These are real sales, not estimates, and they show how much collectors are willing to pay for this particular era. And unlike some rare coins that only advanced collectors chase, the 1984 doubled die penny appeals to a wide range of people. Beginners love it because it's something they might realistically find. Advanced collectors love it because it's a classic modern era with strong eye appeal and proven market demand. Now here's something fascinating. The 1984 doubled die penny wasn't widely recognized right away. For years after its release, most people didn't realize the error existed. Coins circulated freely, and many were spent, lost, or damaged. It wasn't until collectors began noticing patterns of doubling in the mid to late 1980s that the variety was formally identified and documented. That means a large number of these coins were never saved at the time of issue. Unlike modern era coins that get spotted almost immediately and pulled from circulation, the 1984 doubled die slipped through quietly. That's part of what gives it such strong collector appeal today. Another interesting detail is that the 1984 doubled die shows one of the clearest examples of doubled numerals in modern U.S. coinage. Compared to some other doubled dies that require expert eyes to detect, this one is often visible even with a basic magnifier. That makes it both collectible and approachable. Here's another fun fact. Because pennies are often overlooked, coin roll hunters still search bank rolls specifically for doubled die varieties like the 1984. Some collectors go through thousands of cents at a time, checking dates and designs one by one. And while most rolls produce nothing special, Every now and then, someone finds something extraordinary. That sense of possibility is one of the reasons this coin continues to captivate people decades after it was minted. Collectors also love the 1984 penny because it represents a unique moment in U.S. minting history. It comes from the early zinc era, a time when the mint was adjusting to new materials and technologies. Many of the most famous modern errors come from this period, and the 1984 double die stands near the top of that list. And despite being more than 40 years old, the coin still feels modern enough to connect people to everyday life. This isn't ancient history. It's the change you might have used to buy candy, soda, or newspapers. That emotional connection adds to its appeal. Now let's talk about something important. Just because a coin is old does not automatically mean it's valuable. Most 1984 pennies are worth face value. Even many that look unusual are simply worn, damaged, or stained. Real value comes from specific varieties, strong condition, and confirmed authenticity. But here's the key takeaway. The 1984 No Mint Mark Lincoln penny proves that rare coins don't always come from distant centuries or exotic places. Sometimes, they come from everyday change. A coin that looks ordinary on the surface can hide a rare mistake that transforms it into a collector treasure. That's why this penny continues to be searched, studied, and collected today. It represents possibility, it represents discovery, and it reminds people that history isn't always locked in museums. Sometimes, it's sitting quietly in a drawer, waiting to be noticed. So the next time you see a 1984 penny, don't dismiss it. Pick it up. Look closely at the date. Check Liberty. See if anything looks doubled or unusual, because one small detail could turn an ordinary cent into a coin worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And even if you never find one, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. Because sometimes, the most valuable treasures are the ones hiding in plain sight. Most people would never look twice at a penny from the late 1980s. But what if I told you that one ordinary-looking 1988 Lincoln cent could be hiding something special? Something that collectors actively search for, and sometimes pay far more than 1 cent to own. Today, we're uncovering the quiet story behind the 1988 No Mint Mark Lincoln penny, and why this everyday coin still matters more than you might expect. The 1988 No Mint Mark Lincoln penny is a 1 cent coin struck in Philadelphia. If you look closely at the front of the coin and don't see a small letter under the date, that's what no mint mark means. It doesn't mean the coin is rare by default, but it does tell us where it was made, and it opens the door to understanding why some examples are far more valuable than others. At first glance, this coin looks just like millions of other Lincoln pennies from the late 20th century. But behind that familiar copper color and Abraham Lincoln's face is a story about American history, changing metals, massive production, and a few hidden surprises that collectors still hunt for today. Let's go back to the year 1988. America in the late 1980s was changing fast. The Cold War was winding down, personal computers were entering homes, and the U.S. economy was shifting toward technology and finance. But one thing remained constant. Americans still used coins every day for vending machines, parking meters, and small purchases. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies each year to meet demand, and 1988 was no exception. That year, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 5.2 billion Lincoln cents without a mint mark. Denver struck even more with a D mint mark, and San Francisco produced proof coins for collectors. But the no mint mark coins, the Philadelphia ones, became the backbone of everyday pocket change. These pennies were part of the Lincoln Memorial Series, which had been running since 1959. The obverse, or front, shows Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. This design had already become one of the most recognizable coin portraits in the world. The reverse shows the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., with Lincoln's statue visible between the columns if you look closely. By 1988, Americans had been seeing this same design for nearly 3 decades. But something important had already changed, something most people didn't notice. Before 1982, U.S. pennies were made mostly of copper, but rising copper prices forced the mint to change the composition. Starting in 1982, pennies were made of zinc with a thin copper coating. That means the 1988 no-mint mark penny is not solid copper. Instead, it's about 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper. This change had a huge impact on how pennies wear over time. Zinc cores can corrode if the copper coating gets damaged. That's why many pennies from the 1980s and 1990s look spotted, darkened, or bubbled today. Finding a clean, bright red 1988 penny in excellent condition is much harder than most people expect. Now let's talk about the design features. On the front, you'll see the word Liberty to the left of Lincoln's face, the date 1988 to the right, and the phrase "In God We Trust" across the top. There's no mint mark below the date, which tells us it came from Philadelphia. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial fills the center, with United States of America at the top and 1 cent at the bottom. Between the columns, you can faintly see Lincoln's seated statue, one of the few times a real person appears twice on the same U.S. coin. The edges are smooth, and the coin weighs about 2.5 grams. The diameter is about 19 millimeters, the same as most modern pennies. So far, nothing sounds rare. Billions were made. Most are still worth 1 cent. But here's where the story gets interesting. While most 1988 no-mint mark pennies are common, certain examples can be valuable because of condition, errors, or unusual strikes. In coin collecting, small differences can make a huge difference in price. Let's start with condition. Coins are graded on a scale, with higher grades meaning better condition. Most 1988 pennies today are worn, scratched, or darkened. But some coins were saved when new, rolled in bank wrappers, or never entered circulation. These high-grade coins, especially those graded MS67 or MS68 by professional grading services, can sell for surprisingly strong prices. In fact, some top-quality 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln cents have sold for over $1,000 at auction, not because the coin is rare, but because perfect examples are. That's one of the most surprising truths about coin collecting. Sometimes the most valuable coins aren't the oldest or rarest by mintage. They're the ones that survived in the best condition. Now let's talk about errors. Errors are mistakes that happen during the minting process. Most are caught and destroyed, but some slip into circulation. These error coins are like fingerprints. No two are exactly alike, and collectors love them. Some 1988 pennies show doubled dies, where parts of the design appear doubled, especially in the date or lettering. This happens when the die strikes the coin slightly off alignment during manufacturing. On genuine doubled die coins, the doubling looks sharp and separated, not blurry. Other 1988 pennies show off-center strikes, where the design isn't centered on the coin. Some have clipped planchets, meaning a curved piece of metal is missing from the edge. Others show die cracks, cud marks, or weak strikes where details are faint. While most error coins are worth modest premiums, certain dramatic or rare errors can sell for hundreds of dollars, sometimes more. But there's one category that really gets collectors excited: transitional or wrong planchet errors. Because the mint had changed penny composition in the early 1980s, there was always a chance, however small, that a coin could be struck on the wrong metal. A genuine 1988 penny struck on a leftover copper planchet from earlier years would be extremely rare and valuable. These types of coins must be professionally authenticated, but when real, they can bring thousands of dollars. Now let's look at real-world value examples. Most circulated 1988 no-mint mark pennies are worth 1 cent. Even in nice condition, many are worth only a few cents each. But in uncirculated condition, especially bright red coins with sharp details. Prices rise quickly. Coins graded MS-65 often sell for a few dollars. MS-66 examples can sell for $10 to $25. MS-67 coins have sold for over $100. And the very best examples, MS-68 or higher, have reached auction prices exceeding $1,000. Error coins vary widely. Minor errors might sell for $5 to $20. Strong doubled dies or dramatic off-center strikes can sell for $100 to $500 or more, depending on eye appeal and rarity. Now here's the important question. How do you tell if your 1988 penny is something special? Start by checking the date and mint mark area. If there's no letter under the date, it's from Philadelphia. That's normal. Next, examine the coin's condition. Look at Lincoln's hair, cheek, and jawline. On high-grade coins, these areas are sharp and detailed, not flat or worn. Look at the memorial steps and columns on the back. Strong lines and clean surfaces matter. Then, check for doubling. Use a magnifying glass and look closely at the numbers in the date, especially the 9 and 8, and the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust. True doubling looks like a second image, not just a shadow or blur. Also look for off-center strikes, missing metal along the edges, or strange bumps or cracks in the design. Anything that looks unusual compared to normal pennies deserves closer attention. Finally, weigh the coin if possible. A standard 1988 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it weighs significantly more, that could suggest it was struck on the wrong metal, something that requires professional verification. But what about fakes? Fortunately, fake modern pennies are rare because there's usually little profit in counterfeiting low-value coins. However, altered coins do exist. Some people try to create fake errors by damaging coins or modifying them to look unusual. The best way to protect yourself is to remember this. Real mint errors look natural. The metal flows smoothly into the mistake. Artificial damage usually looks rough, sharp, or forced. If a coin seems too strange to be real, it's best to have it examined by a professional grading service. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1988 penny. First, even though it looks copper, it's mostly zinc. That thin copper coating is only about 8 microns thick, thinner than a human hair. Once it wears through, the gray zinc core shows, which is why many modern pennies look dull or blotchy. Second, billions of 1988 pennies still exist, but truly perfect ones are incredibly scarce. Most coins get damaged within weeks of entering circulation. Finding a flawless one decades later is like finding a needle in a haystack. Third, 1988 was part of the final full decade of the Lincoln Memorial Reverse. In 2009, the Mint changed the reverse design to honor Lincoln's life, and in 2010 introduced the Union Shield design. That makes the memorial pennies, including 1988, part of a completed historical era. Fourth, Lincoln is the longest-running portrait on any U.S. coin. He first appeared on the cent in 1909, and more than a century later, he's still there. The 1988 penny is one small link in that long chain of American history. So why do collectors care about a coin that most people ignore? Because coin collecting isn't just about rarity. It's about stories. It's about holding something that passed through countless hands, witnessed everyday life, and survived decades in drawers, jars, and piggy banks. For some collectors, the 1988 no mint mark penny represents childhood memories of coin rolls, allowance money, or sorting change at the kitchen table. For others, it's part of a larger goal, completing a Lincoln cent set, finding the best possible example of every year, or hunting for errors and varieties. And then there's the thrill of discovery. Imagine pouring out a jar of old change and spotting a bright red 1988 penny that looks almost new, or noticing doubled letters under a magnifier, or finding a coin that weighs just a little more than it should. That moment, when something ordinary suddenly feels extraordinary, is what keeps collectors searching. Even though most 1988 pennies are common, every single one holds the same potential story. You never know which coin might turn out to be special until you look. And that's the real magic of this coin. It teaches us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hidden in condition, in tiny details, or in mistakes that weren't supposed to happen. A coin worth 1 cent today could be worth much more tomorrow, not because it changed, but because someone finally noticed what made it different. So the next time you see a penny dated 1988, don't toss it aside. Turn it over, look closely, check the details, because somewhere out there, one of these ordinary-looking coins is waiting to surprise someone, and who knows, the next one might be in your pocket right now. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, but could be worth far more than 1 cent. No shine, no gold color, no special design at first glance. Just a simple Lincoln penny dated 1994 with no mint mark. Most people would spend it without a second thought, but collectors know something very different. Some of these everyday pennies have stories, secrets, and surprising value hiding in plain sight. Today, we're uncovering the truth about the 1994 no mint mark Lincoln penny, where it came from, what makes it special, how much it can be worth, and why people across America are still searching through their change hoping to find one. Let's start with what this coin actually is. A 1994 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1 cent coin struck by the United States Mint in Philadelphia. When a penny has no letter below the date, it means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use mint marks on pennies until much later. In 1994, millions of pennies were produced in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, but only the Philadelphia coins lack a mint mark. At first glance, this coin looks just like most Lincoln pennies made since 1959. On the front is Abraham Lincoln's profile, facing right, designed by Victor David Brenner. Above his head is the word Liberty, and behind him is the date, 1994. On the back is the Lincoln Memorial with the words 1 cent and United States of America, along with the phrase EPLURIBUSUNUM. It's simple, familiar, and for most people forgettable. But behind this ordinary appearance is a moment in American history that shaped how these coins were made, and in some cases, why certain examples are now worth far more than their face value. The year 1994 was a time of major transition in the United States Mint. Just over a decade earlier, in 1982, the Mint changed the composition of the penny from mostly copper to copper-plated zinc. Before that, pennies were about 95% copper. After 1982, they became mostly zinc, with only a thin copper coating on the outside. By 1994, this newer composition had been standard for more than 10 years. But collectors were still paying close attention to quality, errors, and unusual variations, especially as minting technology continued to evolve. The Philadelphia Mint produced more than 4 billion pennies that year, making 1994 one of the highest mintage years in modern U.S. coin history. 4 billion coins sounds like a lot, and it is. That's why most 1994 no mint mark pennies are worth just 1 cent today. But here's the twist. Among those billions are a small number of coins with mistakes, odd features, or unusual conditions that make them extremely desirable to collectors. And those are the pennies that turn pocket change into treasure. Let's take a closer look at the features of the 1994 no mint mark penny. The coin weighs 2.5 grams and measures about 19 millimeters across. It's made of 97.5% zinc, coated with 2.5% copper. This gives it that familiar reddish-brown color when new, which often darkens over time into brown or even chocolate tones. On the front, Lincoln's portrait shows fine details in the hair, coat, and jawline. On well-struck coins, you can see clear lines in his hair and strong definition in his facial features. On worn coins, those details fade, especially on the cheek and jaw. On the back, The Lincoln Memorial design includes tiny columns and steps, and if the coin is sharply struck, you can even see a small statue of Lincoln inside the memorial building. But what really catches collectors' attention isn't the design itself. It's what sometimes goes wrong during the minting process. Errors are where the real excitement begins. One of the most well-known error types found on 1994 no mint mark pennies is the doubled die. This happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during its creation, causing parts of the design to appear doubled on the finished coin. On some 1994 pennies, collectors have found doubling in the date, the word liberty, or the phrase "in God we trust." These are not machine doubling marks caused by loose equipment. True doubled dies show rounded, separated lettering that looks almost like a shadow behind the main design. And when verified, these coins can be worth anywhere from $50 to several $100s, depending on clarity and condition. Another popular error is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin isn't properly centered during minting, causing part of the design to be cut off and leaving a blank crescent-shaped area on the edge. Minor off-center strikes might bring $10 to $25, while dramatic ones showing half the design or more can sell for $100 or more. There are also clipped planchet errors, where part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, leaving a curved bite-shaped cut in the edge. These errors are visually striking and often sell for $20 to $75 or more. Then there are broad strikes, where the coin is struck outside the retaining collar, causing it to spread out wider than normal, often with a flat edge instead of a raised rim. These can sell for $25 to $100 depending on condition. And finally, there are wrong planchet errors, which are extremely rare. This happens when a penny is struck on a blank meant for another coin, such as a dime or foreign coin. These are exceptionally valuable and can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, though confirmed examples from 1994 are extremely scarce. So with all these errors in mind, you might wonder, is a normal 1994 no mint mark penny worth anything beyond 1 cent? In most cases, no, but condition changes everything. In everyday circulation, most of these coins are worn, scratched, or discolored. Those are worth face value. But in uncirculated condition, especially those with bright red copper color and sharp details, collectors pay attention. A typical 1994 no mint mark penny in uncirculated condition might sell for 10 to 25 cents. But in high-grade mint state condition, especially coins graded MS67 or higher by professional grading services, values can rise dramatically. Some certified MS67 examples have sold at auction for $50 to $100. And in rare cases, coins graded MS68, which means nearly flawless, have reached prices above $300. These prices are driven by scarcity at the top condition levels, not by rarity of the date itself. The real money, though, is in the errors. One verified 1994 double die obverse penny sold for over $400 in a collector auction. Another dramatic off-center strike example sold for around $150. And clipped planchet versions regularly bring $40 to $80 depending on size and appearance. These are not lottery-level prices, but for a coin that originally cost 1 cent, the return can be astonishing. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1994 no mint mark penny and avoid fakes or misidentified coins. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1994 with no mint mark below it. If you see a D or S, that means it was minted in Denver or San Francisco and is not the Philadelphia version. Next, look at the color and weight. A genuine 1994 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams and have a copper-colored surface. If it feels unusually heavy or light, or if the color looks strange, it could be damaged or altered. If you suspect a doubled die, use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom to examine the date, liberty, and "in God we trust." True doubling will look rounded and clearly separated, not flat or shelf-like. For off-center or clipped coins, make sure the edges are smooth and natural-looking, not cut or filed. Genuine mint errors have rounded edges and consistent metal flow patterns. Also beware of altered coins. Some people try to carve, grind, or modify normal pennies to make them look like errors. These are worth nothing to collectors and can usually be spotted by rough edges, tool marks, or unnatural shapes. If you believe you've found something valuable, the best step is to have it evaluated by a professional coin dealer, or submit it to a grading service like PCGS or NGC. Authentication adds credibility and significantly increases resale value. Now let's explore a few fun and surprising facts about the 1994 no mint mark penny. First, even though billions were minted, very few exist today in perfect condition. Most were quickly circulated, scratched, dropped, and worn down over decades of use. That's why high-grade examples are so hard to find. Second, some collectors specifically hunt for coins from the 1990s, because this era produced a wide range of modern mint errors that are still affordable compared to older coins. That makes coins like the 1994 penny a popular entry point for new collectors. Third, many valuable examples are found not in collections, but in everyday change, old jars, piggy banks, or inherited coin rolls that haven't been searched in decades. Fourth, because the penny was so common in daily life during the 1990s, many people overlook these coins entirely. That means rare errors can sit unnoticed for years, sometimes decades, before being discovered. And finally, the Lincoln Memorial design on this coin represents the final chapter of that reverse style, which ended in 2008. That gives coins like the 1994 penny a place in the broader story of Lincoln cent design history. So why do collectors love this coin today? Part of it is accessibility. Almost everyone has handled a penny from the 1990s. That familiarity makes the idea of hidden value especially exciting. It's not some ancient gold coin locked in a museum. It's something you might already own. Another reason is the thrill of the hunt. Searching through rolls of pennies, old jars, or inherited collections creates a treasure hunt experience where discovery feels personal and rewarding. Collectors also appreciate the educational value. Coins like the 1994 penny teach beginners about mint marks, coin grading, mint errors, and the economics of supply and demand, all using a coin that's easy to find and study. And finally, there's the emotional connection. These coins circulated during a time many people remember well. They passed through hands during everyday moments, grocery trips, coffee purchases, school lunches, and more. Holding one today is like holding a small piece of personal and national history. Now let's imagine this scenario. You're cleaning out a drawer, sorting through old change, and you come across a handful of pennies from the 1990s. Most look worn, but one catches your eye. The date reads 1994. There's no mint mark, and something about the lettering looks different. You grab a magnifier. The date appears doubled. The letters in Liberty seem to have shadows behind them. Suddenly, that ordinary penny feels extraordinary. What was once 1 cent now might be worth hundreds. That moment of discovery is exactly what keeps collectors searching. Even if you never find a rare error, understanding coins like the 1994 no mint mark penny changes how you see everyday objects. It reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. So the next time you get change at a store or open a coin jar, take a second look at those pennies, especially the ones dated 1994. Check for errors, check the condition, check the details, because one small copper-colored coin quietly sitting in your pocket could hold a story far bigger than you ever imagined. And who knows, your next penny might not just buy a piece of candy, it might buy a piece of history. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, but could be hiding a value far beyond 1 cent. A coin so common, so familiar, that millions of people spend it every day without ever looking twice. And yet, some 1995 Lincoln pennies with no mint mark have quietly sold for shocking prices. Not because they're rare by date, but because of what went wrong during the minting process. Today, we're uncovering the real story behind the 1995 no mint mark Lincoln penny, and why you might want to check your change right now. The 1995 Lincoln penny is one of the most widely circulated coins in modern American history. It features Abraham Lincoln on the front, just like pennies have since 1909, and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a design used from 1959 through 2008. Most of these coins were made in Philadelphia, which traditionally does not place a mint mark on pennies. That's why your 1995 penny likely shows no letter under the date, and that's completely normal. At first glance, this coin doesn't seem special. It's brown, small, and familiar. But behind this simple appearance is a fascinating story of mass production, microscopic mistakes, and how tiny details can turn pocket change into collector gold. In 1995, the United States Mint was producing billions of coins each year to keep up with everyday commerce. The economy was strong, population was growing, and coins were moving fast through vending machines, parking meters, and cash registers. That year alone, over 6 billion Lincoln cents were minted, most of them in Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia Mint produced more than 5 billion pennies in 1995, and since that mint does not use a mint mark on cents, most 1995 pennies simply show the date and nothing else. These coins were struck in large automated presses that could produce hundreds of coins per minute. Speed and efficiency were the priorities, and with that kind of volume, mistakes were bound to happen. Most of these coins were released directly into circulation and spent almost immediately. Few people thought to save them. After all, they looked exactly like every other penny in circulation. But collectors know something most people don't. Sometimes the most valuable coins come from the most ordinary years. Let's talk about what the 1995 Lincoln penny is made of and how it was designed. By 1995, the penny was no longer made of solid copper like older cents. Instead, it was composed of 97.5% zinc with a thin outer coating of copper. This change happened in 1982 to reduce production costs, since copper prices had risen significantly. That means the 1995 penny feels lighter than older copper cents and can corrode more easily if damaged. On the front of the coin, Abraham Lincoln faces right, just as he has since the design's debut in 1909. Above his head is the word Liberty. To the right of his portrait is the date, 1995. Beneath the date is where you would normally see a mint mark like D for Denver or S for San Francisco, but on Philadelphia pennies, there is no mint mark at all. On the back of the coin is the Lincoln Memorial, with the words United States of America across the top, EPLURIBUSUNUM just below, and 1 cent at the bottom. If you look closely at the center of the memorial, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside, making this one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. So if billions were made, why would any 1995 no mint mark penny be valuable? The answer lies in errors, and one specific variety that stunned the coin-collecting world. In 1995, a small number of pennies were struck with a dramatic doubling of the date and lettering on the front of the coin. This is known as a double die obverse error. Instead of a normal, sharp image, the letters and numbers appear doubled, as if they were stamped twice but slightly offset. On the famous 1995 double die penny, the doubling is especially strong on the word Liberty and the phrase In God We Trust. Even without magnification, many examples show clear separation between the letters, making the error easy to spot once you know what to look for. This wasn't damage. It wasn't wear. It wasn't someone altering the coin. This doubling happened during the creation of the coin die itself, meaning every coin struck from that die carried the same dramatic error. And here's what makes this story even more fascinating. Thousands of these error coins entered circulation before anyone noticed. People spent them in grocery stores, dropped them in tip jars, and tossed them into jars at home, completely unaware of what they had. When collectors finally discovered the variety, the search began. Roll hunters, dealers, and everyday people started checking their spare change, and some were rewarded in a big way. High-grade examples of the 1995 double-die penny have sold for hundreds, and sometimes thousands of dollars. In circulated condition, these coins often sell for $20 to $50. In uncirculated condition, prices commonly range from $100 to $300. And in top condition, professionally graded examples have sold at auction for over $2,000. One especially sharp example, graded MS67, read by a major grading service, sold for more than $3,000 at auction, all for a coin that originally cost just 1 cent. And that's only one variety. Other minor errors on 1995 pennies include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, weak strikes, and wrong metal errors. While most are worth modest premiums, some dramatic mistakes can bring hundreds of dollars depending on condition and visibility. So how do you tell if your 1995 penny is just common change or something special? First, look at the front of the coin. Focus on the words Liberty and In God We Trust. On the valuable double-die version, you'll see clear doubling, not just thickness, but actual separation between the letters. The date 1995 may also show doubling, especially on the numbers 1 and 9. It helps to use a magnifying glass or your phone's camera zoom feature. A genuine double die will show strong, rounded doubling that looks like part of the design. Flat, shelf-like doubling is usually the result of machine damage and is not valuable. Next, check the coin's condition. Pennies with full red color and sharp details are worth more than worn brown examples. Scratches, corrosion, or cleaning can significantly reduce value, even on rare varieties. Also, make sure the coin weighs correctly. A normal 1995 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it weighs significantly more or less, it could indicate a wrong metal error or damage, both of which deserve closer inspection. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to create fake double dies by carving or tooling letters, but these usually look unnatural under magnification. A genuine double die will look smooth and rounded, not rough or scratched. If you think you've found something special, it's best to have the coin examined by a professional coin dealer or submit it to a reputable grading service for authentication. Here's something surprising. The 1995 double-die penny is one of the most widely collected modern era coins in U.S. history. Unlike ultra-rare coins that only a few collectors will ever own, this one remains attainable, yet exciting, because new examples still occasionally surface in circulation, even decades later. That's right, people are still finding these coins in pocket change today. Another fun fact: this variety became famous partly because of the internet. In the mid-1990s, online coin forums and early websites helped spread awareness of the error faster than ever before. Suddenly, thousands of people were searching through penny rolls at banks, hoping to strike gold, and some actually did. It also sparked renewed interest in error collecting, especially among younger collectors who realized that valuable coins didn't only exist in museums or old collections. Sometimes they were hiding in everyday change. And while the double-die version is the star, even normal 1995 pennies in pristine condition can be worth more than face value. Uncirculated examples with strong red color can sell for a few dollars, especially if professionally graded. While that may not sound like much, it's still a huge return on a 1-cent investment. Collectors love this coin for several reasons. First, it tells a story of hidden value, how something ordinary can become extraordinary through chance alone. Second, it represents the excitement of the hunt. Unlike rare gold coins locked away in vaults, the 1995 double die penny can still be found by anyone willing to look closely. Third, it belongs to the beloved Lincoln Cent series, one of the longest-running and most collected coin series in American history. And finally, it reminds us that history isn't always loud. Sometimes, it hides quietly in your pocket, waiting to be noticed. So the next time you receive change at a store or empty a jar of old pennies onto your table, take a closer look at those 1995 cents. Check the date, study the letters, tilt the coin in the light, because among thousands of ordinary pennies, one small mistake could turn an everyday coin into a collector treasure. And who knows, the most valuable coin you'll ever own might already be sitting in your home right now, unnoticed, waiting for you to discover it. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden story behind the 1995 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, stay curious, because the next coin you overlook could be the next one everyone wishes they had checked.